Let us call this meeting to order of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners Planning and Building Committee. Today's Tuesday, August 15th. Could we have a roll call, please?
Crawford.
Here.
McGilvray.
Here.
Dwyer is absent with notice. Berman.
Here.
Teets.
Here.
Quarles and Jackson are not here yet. Whitebird.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could we have approval of the previous minutes of August 1st? Moved by Commissioner Crawford, supported by Commissioner McGilvray. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed. Could we have approval of today's agenda? Moved by Commissioner Berman, supported by Commissioner Crawford. All in favor?
Aye.
That passed. No, any opposed? That passed. Any public comment today? Seeing no public comment, we'll move on to today's regular agenda. The first item is Water Resources Commissioner resolution for bond issue for the Evergreen Farmington Sewage Disposal System improvements, the Middle Belt Transport and Storage Tunnel project for the county. Could I have a motion, please? Moved by Commissioner Jackson, supported by Commissioner Berman. Good morning.
Good morning. Sid Lockhart, Special Project Manager, Water Resources. This bond is for money that the state has been shorting us on our SRF loan. Normally, getting a project, they'll tell us that there's an eligible cost. Typically, they don't cover a lot of the county's overhead. There's like 40% they ding us and some of our labor. This particular project was unique because they told our project manager, assistant chief engineer, Tom Maxwell at the time, that everything was eligible. Then hence, once we get into the project, it's not anyway. So normally we have other funds on hand at the start of a project. This kind of thing that happens, the state has identified things that aren't eligible. We usually have another bond issue, $1 million, $2 million, whatever the need may be. Other times there's 4 communities paying this bond off. Sometimes communities will prepay their money and then we'll have cash on hand to avoid the problem of our accounts running in deficit. So what happens in the state revolving loan fund is you don't get like a normal bond issue, you don't get the money up front. We have to expend the money, get all the receipts in, then turn all the receipts into the state, the loan manager and our labor, Leo Lease and Fiscal, they pull payroll and go through it, and then someone at the state goes through all that in detail and then comes back and says, we're not paying this, not paying that. Last year that caused a problem of a negative fund balance within the Act 342 fund accounts that Fiscal holds. It's a separate pot, independent of all other accounts. That was going to drive a deficit elimination plan potentially with the Treasury Department, and that was taken care of with the Building Liability Fund. This year, that we're not using that moving forward. So this year we're asking for this bond to be approved for $1 million to cover ineligible expenses. It was up to $2.5 million until about a couple weeks ago, and I actually had called the EPA because the EPA oversees the state revolving loan fund because they get EPA money in Region 5 in Chicago. I happened to manage grants years ago with the EPA and happened to know the loan manager that's in charge of Region 5 of Chicago of the state, and he actually helped. The state determined that $1.5 million was eligible, that they were declaring uneligible for about a year. So this would have been bigger, it would have been $2.5 million, but they just shook loose a couple weeks ago, $1.5 million, now we're asking for $1 million. And so what's happened, the loan amount from the state is reduced, and so this is just supplementing the difference. So there should be no more in total than what was originally asked for, 36.8, just getting it in 2 different buckets.
Any questions? Commissioner Teets.
Is the bond backed by the communities or backed by the county then?
And Act 342, that's backed by the communities, full faith and credit, and the county. If they're sold using Act 34, then in Act 34, that's what our office typically controls the revenue stream. Here we have all the billing rates of the system as a whole for the Evergreen Farmington, the Clinton, Oakland. Then we can use Act 34, and the county's full faith and credit is pledged, but not the underlying communities in Act 34. And then the resolution, it describes both acts.
So the quick answer is communities.
Well, it's both.
It's both. Column A and column B.
The county and the communities, yes.
Any other questions?
Sorry.
Commissioner Teets.
Thanks. Why were some things deemed ineligible this time versus other times? Did, someone wake up on the wrong side of the bed, or was it, I don't, you know, what?
It's more the other way around. Usually there's always things that are ineligible with the state. I've done 5 or 6 of these in my career, and there's always stuff they declare ineligible. They wanna make sure things fit their rules, and they kinda make up their own rules, and a lot of times they blame the EPA, and the EPA says, no, it's our rule, the state made up that rule. They wanna make sure though that things are capital costs, not operational costs. And I'll give you an example for a water main project. We'll have people in our system, of those we own and operate, say Pontiac, for example. We have these in Pontiac. Well, we've had our operations people have to shut the water main off for the contractors. Then the valves are old and leaking, and the valves they turn don't do it, and they have to keep going back and finding them. So we have a big outlay of labor. We'll run payroll on that. They'll pick up that person's title as an operational person. And they'll say, oh, no, we're not paying for operations, you know, just capital. We'll say, well, the capital need drove this guy to go out there, or lady, go out there and close all this, causing extra labor. They said, no, that's an operational person, we're not paying for him. And that's a whole big process in the front we have to do. So we have to turn in a project plan, it's usually 5-year, get a funding list. Then when the 5 years starts, they tell you in year 1, here's your outlay you're gonna do, get it approved. Then when it happens, there's a 3-part application process. So in part 1, we have to tell them all the contracts we have with consultants, estimate the labor. Part 2, the labor, they have more detail, so I have to have a crystal ball and tell them every person that was gonna work on that project, their title, their name. Sometimes if we switch people, they'll give me grief about that. They'll say, oh, this person is on here, you didn't say that 2 years ago in your application. I'll say, well, that person now filling in for a person that had the same title. And then if something happens on a project, have to, you know, do more community involvement like this one, there's more people that get engaged. And they said, you didn't tell me ahead of time, so I'll have a crystal ball 2 years ago to know every exact person. And this always happens with them, across the board.
And that reason,
Commissioner Berman.
so, and some of those unforeseen issues, without having a crystal ball, resulted in a shortfall of eligible reimbursable funds in this total amount here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and normally, like I said, a lot of those are, known up front. Well, they'll say, we're not paying for this person. This one, I even asked the Assistant Chief Engineer, Tom Maxwell, all the time, I says, you're sure everything's eligible? Cause they never make everything eligible. He says, yeah, they told me everything is eligible. And then hence you get into it, they still ding us for overhead, the county overhead on the Maximus system and charges like that. And then also with all the additional staff that we had, so. Look at what, and it's a fight, it's a constant battle all the time, and those loans are a pain to administer, unfortunately.
Commissioner Berman.
Is this project finally completed, done, all the issues with that neighborhood resolved?
Yeah, there's still a couple people, like a guy, I just saw an email the other day, I can't remember his name, still thinks he had a problem with some iron filter, I'm gonna put some new heating in, but yeah, all that part's behind us. Is there still some additional testing that's going on? That's one thing that declared ineligible was the testing for the residents. They said they weren't paying for that, that's a $200,000 program, was an example of one of the things we're paying for. But yeah, the project is wrapping up, there's still some final restoration to do, you know, grading and grass, but the watering's been done for a long time, it drove kind of the impact to the neighborhood.
Any other questions? Let's call the roll.
Crawford.
Yes.
McGilvray.
Yes.
Berman.
Yes.
Teets.
Yes.
Quarles.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Whiteford.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion for direct referral to finance. Moved by Commissioner Berman, supported by Commissioner McGilvery. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 2 is Parks and Recreation Commission residential lease for the Oakland Urban Growers, Waterford Oaks. Good morning.
Good morning.
Moved by Commissioner Crawford, supported by Commissioner McGilvery.
Dan Stenzel, Executive Officer for Oakland County Parks and Recreation Commission, and Phil Castoni, our Business Operations Manager. This is for a residential lease at Waterford Oaks for 1,392 square foot house at Waterford Oaks, and Phil will give you the details of the lease.
So this is a residential house that's adjacent to the greenhouse complex over at Waterford Oaks. This is being leased to the Oakland Urban Growers in conjunction with the next lease, which is the lease of the greenhouse facility. This lease was developed with the market study done by facilities management, and it's in accordance to our lease policy that we have in place for all of our other residential leases. So they're paying market rate, we will be doing the maintenance on this house. And it's our standard residential lease that you've seen for approval before.
And this one is a 10-year lease to match the 10-year lease that is proposed in the next item as the greenhouse lease.
Any questions? I just saw there's a lot of history on this, consent judgments and neighborhood disputes maybe about use of the property. That's all old history?
That's old history in this case, and this is a permitted use. They can't provide retail operations at this site, only for wholesale purposes. And it's part of our fiscal sustainability effort to take facilities that are performing at less than peak opportunity and to look for ways to partner with, in this case, a private entity to provide a service for the public.
Any other questions? Let's call a roll.
McGilvray?
Yes.
Berman?
Yes.
Teets?
Yes.
Quarles?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
Whiteford?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 3 is Parks and Recreation Commission, a lease with the Oakland Urban Growers, Waterford Oaks Parks again. Good morning. Moved by Commissioner Crawford, supported by Commissioner McGilvray.
This lease is, this is actually for the greenhouse complex now that's adjacent to the house. This is a property we've been looking to kind of either dispose of or lease out. It was originally acquired to potentially, it adjoins to Waterford Oaks, so we, since it had greenhouses on it, we attempted to use it internally for flowers to provide to our parks, but financially it just wasn't a good way to do it. So we put our RFP out almost 2 years ago to either remove the greenhouses from the property or to lease them out. We only did receive one response from Oakland Urban Growers. They have been tweaking their business model and working on financing, but they're gonna do, attempt to do more of an organic, for fruits and vegetables in there. They're working with some major area restaurants to provide, you know, that farm fresh vegetable, to the local restaurants. We've had conversations with them about, potentially, attending our farmers market and being a vendor there as well, since there is no retail operation on this site. But they do have a good business plan to utilize these facilities and really provide that local farm fresh fruits and vegetables to the area restaurants. This lease there's not really a market rate that can be developed for a greenhouse. So to cover our costs, we've taken all of our direct costs. We're gonna provide the lawn mowing and the snow plowing of the facility that we normally would. And then our annual inspections of this facility, and then we mark that up and put an overhead on it. So we're guaranteed to cover our costs, and the insurance on these facilities, and then they will in turn cover the day-to-day maintenance of the facilities and the equipment inside. So our goal was to make sure this is not a losing endeavor for us and that we're covering our costs, but still making use of the facility since they're there.
Then also looking for public benefit, they are required to have educational programs periodically at the facilities so that we can have open houses and share with the public how their food is making its way to their dinner table through innovation and organic growing.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner McGilvray?
Yeah, Phil, you mentioned that we would be in charge of maintenance on the house,
Correct.
but not on the greenhouses.
Correct. Yeah, the house is, all of our residential properties we're in charge of the maintenance on, and the lease rates are structured that way. And so we're comfortable doing that. With the greenhouse, there is no real market rate to cover the rate and the maintenance on it. When we were able to negotiate that out, and put it in their hands, it lessened our burden, and, that's why we still have the control. They do it to our maintenance standards, but, we're not gonna have staff in those greenhouses. And my fear is if we had a staff and we didn't fix something properly and they lose their crops, then we're on the hook. Whereas if they're in charge of maintenance, then they'll ensure those are operating the needs of their crops inside, so.
Along with that, then, do you anticipate any major cost to the maintenance of the house over the 10-year lease?
We do have some major costs, to kind of bring it up to the standard residential code per se, that it would make it, habitable. I mean, the roof is a future expense, but there are some electrical issues in the house that we're working on before they move in, but, we're looking at, I think it was a $10,000 to $15,000 long-term expense to get this house where it needs to be, but, would be covered through the payback and the monthly rent, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Teets.
Is it a public location? I don't understand why we're plowing the driveway in the winter. And if the concern is liability with the building, what about the liability we would face with the plowing and slip and fall issues?
It's kind of hard because we do this for all of our residential houses, and these properties are adjoined. So there's not a way to carve out where we would plow and do the grass for the residential house, but not the greenhouse. So that was through the negotiations that we have the staff and equipment on hand to do that, when they're doing the rest of the park. So that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, and there is public access for these programs and so on that'll occur basically on a monthly basis, so there will be public utilizing this facility.
Okay.
Any other questions? I saw down the lease, if it's ever terminated, we own the nursery stock, is that?
We have the nursery stock there right now. We have a tree nursery that we're holding on to till at least the end of 2019. That then we can transport out into the parks. We didn't want that to become part of the lease where they would take over that nursery that we've had growing. So that's what that's referring to.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Let's call roll.
Berman,
Yes.
Teets,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
McGilvray.
Yes.
Whiteford.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is Department of Economic Development and Community Affairs, Community and Home Improvement Division, fiscal year 2017, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Housing Counseling Program Grant Acceptance. Good morning.
Good morning.
Need a motion? Commissioner Quarles and Commissioner, supported by Commissioner McGilvray.
Carrie Reed, Manager of Community and Home Improvement Division. I have with me Kathy Williams, who's the supervisor of our housing counseling unit, and this is Kathy's grant, and I'll let her explain it.
Good morning. This is for acceptance of our comprehensive housing counseling grant from HUD. It is a competitive grant. We were awarded $31,771. That's up about $3,000 from last year. We've received this grant continuously since 1990. And it is retroactive back to October 1st of last year. It's a retroactive grant. We have been accruing billables for it. We expect to spend it out by September 30th of this year.
Any questions? And you partially supports position.
Yes, it partially supports my salary. I always make sure I write it good.
Thank you. Any questions? Let's call roll.
Teets,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
McGilvray.
Yes.
Berman.
Yes.
Whiteford.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Item number 5 is Department of Facilities Management, Health and Human Services approval and acceptance of a sublease agreement with Easter Seals of Michigan, Inc. in Oakland County. Need a motion? Commissioner Berman, supported by Commissioner McGilvray.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Paul Zakos with Facilities. I'm the property manager.
Kathy Forsley, Director of Oakland County Health and Human Services.
Leanne Stafford, Health Officer for the Health Division.
Morning.
We are here to get approval of a sublease, and currently the Health Department has the Women's, Infants, and Children program in Walled Lake. It's in the Walled Lake schools, and everything was going along fine, but the Walled Lake schools decided they're going to close that building. So my job was to find a new home, a new office for WIC. The Health Department decided that Walled Lake is a great location, so they wanted to be in Walled Lake. So I spent the time trying to find other office space in that area, which in Walled Lake there's not a lot of. So we ended up contacting, or Health Department knew of Easter Seals, of course, and this co-location is going to work out to be a great location and a great partnership. So Easter Seals already has a lease. They've been there in the old Health Department building for 3 years. And they know the building, and they had some space. And in this particular case, the WIC office will actually be 4 offices, but then they'll share the waiting room, and they'll share the copy room and the kitchen. So in this case, it fits their budget, and the location's great. We're signing a 3-year sublease with Easter Seals. It's pretty much a gross lease, so they don't have to worry about the cost of taxes or insurance or any type of maintenance. It's all included. So there is a part of the lease that's extra for the technology. That is another part of the payment. But if you have questions, I'll give that over to Leanne. But so the lease is really a sublease with current Easter Seals, and will go to 2020, 3 years.
Any questions? So they're going home.
Yes.
And the word's out in Walled Lake, right? The district's selling that building.
That's correct.
So-
I think it's been out in the news and everybody's aware of the change.
And it won't be that, it's not that far removed, and it's a
Right.
comfortable place, so. Any other questions? Let's call a roll.
Quarles?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Crawford?
Yes.
McGilvray?
Yes.
Berman?
Yes.
Teets?
Yes.
Wyper?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is Facilities Management Facilities Plan and Engineering 2017 Children's Village A and J Fencing Project. Need motion? Moved by Commissioner Crawford, supported by Commissioner Jackson. Good morning, Art.
Good morning. The Children's Village campus is pretty wide open, with the exception of 2 gates at the east and west ends of the campus for cars to get in and out. Other than that, it's just open green space. Now, the advantage of that, of course, is it's, you know, an open, inviting environment. The potential downside is that, you know, any member of the public can just walk across the campus, and of course, that is an area where we have children that have been abused, they've been taken out of their homes for safety reasons, and then you also have kids at the other end of the spectrum, which are in a high security building for good reasons. So what we're trying to do here is discourage anyone who's not a county employee from going across that campus, and they're primarily coming from the main campus on this side of Telegraph and going over towards the village. So by putting up this fence, a decorative fence, it's not a high impact fence for vehicles or anything like that, it's just a decorative fence. There'll be signage that says, you know, this is, you know, county property, you know, non-authorized individuals are prohibited. So it's meant to discourage people from cutting across the campus. It'll be 1,350 feet from the Waterford Oaks property line to the north, all the way down to the south end, where the entrance drive is off of County Center Drive was. It'll be an aluminum fence, $75,800, and I'll open it up
Commissioner Quarles.
Thank you. I have no problem with the fence, but just out of curiosity, are you having that traffic of people walking through the campus now?
Yeah, it
Yes.
happens occasionally, someone wants to cut through or, just wandering and they end up on the campus, so it's just a deterrent.
Is there security on
Cameras.
There's security cameras, and of course, they have staff in every one of the buildings, but they're not, I mean, they're equipped to deal with the children, not equipped to deal with other people. And keep in mind that one of the facts of life for the campus here is that we have inmates from the jail and short-term residents at community mental health that get released and walk across campus. This happens every day. And sometimes they can make it over to Children's Village. I mean, we've seen them at almost every building on campus, you know, sheltering from the cold in the wintertime or smoking next to one of the buildings after they've been released, whatever. So it's just a fact of life, unfortunately, that we have to protect.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Let's call the roll.
Jackson,
Yes.
Crawford.
Yes.
McGilvray.
Yes.
Furman.
Yes.
Teets.
Yes.
Quarles.
Yes.
Wyford.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 7 is Department of Facilities Management fiscal year 2018 through fiscal year 2027 capital improvement program. Need a motion? Moved by Commissioner Jackson, supported by Commissioner Furman.
Hoping this is gonna be the most current version that comes up here. You have the most current version in your packet, though. And so we'll start talking about that. We do this every year, of course, and every year it changes pretty dramatically, and the reason for that is that new projects come up, new priorities come up, and we have to adjust to that. Different funding sources come and go for various reasons. And I'll give you an example of that as we go through here. So the purpose of the capital improvement program is to identify all of the major projects that facilities management has to deal with that involve physical assets, okay? Items that are above $30,000 in value, every project that has an asset above that 30,000 comes to you for approval. Assets under the 30,000 are administratively approved, and you see those in the quarterly reports that you get. Several of the items in here are annually recurring, and what we do is we and what we do is we annually evaluate these particular types of assets and say, okay, what are the priorities this year? So the first line item there is roof replacements. Under the civil projects, the first line item is parking lot paving. Those are two good examples of what I'm talking about. So literally every year, our department's engineers go out and look at every single roof and every single parking lot. They examine the elevators. There's another line item in here for elevator maintenance and so on. So several of these items, we have our engineers go out, reevaluate every single year, reprioritize every year, go out and get bids from our contractors to say, okay, what's it gonna cost to deal with these and when. They adjust costs every year too for inflation, and we make those changes to the capital improvement plan every year. You'll see on those particular line items, roof and parking lot and so on, that the dollar allocations across the years are relatively consistent. And obviously we do that on purpose to say, okay, we can't get everything done in one year, but we're gonna consistently, knock these things off over time. Now I make the point about how it's relatively consistent over the years for certain line items, because in other line items it's not. It's generally front loaded. And that front loading reflects a couple things. One is these are one-time unexpected projects that come up. or there are, you know, high priority initiatives that administration is pursuing that we have to get done in a short period of time. So, an example of that is the building security enhancements, and you'll see that there's $7.5 million in 2018, $2 million in 19, and then it drops off to nothing after that. That's because campus security is a high priority. We want to get those done as soon as possible. It's a new line item that we started, I believe, 2 years ago that we never had in the capital improvement plan. So once this is done, it'll probably drop off the capital improvement plan. And there'll be individual projects that come up from time to time, but it won't be a major initiative. Environmental systems, that's primarily chillers, air handling systems, and so on. Those are also consistently scheduled over time and reevaluated annually. Life safety or enhancements are primarily fire alarm systems and the like. There's also $30,000 to $60,000 in each of the first few years for consulting efforts to evaluate what sort of life safety improvements we need to make on campus. We've had one of our annual architects going through all of our buildings for the last year or so, and he will continue to do so and say, okay, in case of a fire, here's the nearest egress route. We have to make sure we have the proper signage. We have to make sure the door swings are in the right way. We have to make sure that the door handles in that route of egress are ADA compliant, those kinds of things. For the most part, we're in really good shape, but there are still a lot of things. Individually, they're not major, but collectively, over the 47 buildings we have, you know, it adds up to a fair amount of money. So we're in the process of dealing with those. Electrical upgrades, switch gear, things like that have to be replaced periodically. You are, I'm pretty sure, very familiar with what we're doing in building security enhancements line items, so I won't go into that. Elevator maintenance, we have a lot of elevator issues. These are all very old elevators. They were installed when the original buildings were built, when the buildings were originally built, I should say. So we're going through and gutting them and replacing the equipment and the interiors of the cabs and so on. We still have a couple of elevators that are problematic, and we have periodic entrapments that we have to deal with. The contract that we have with our current contractor, which I believe is Schindler, is a 30-minute or less response time for entrapments. If it's not an entrapment but a breakdown, I believe the response time is 2 hours. And they've done a good job of meeting that 30-minute response time. It's never a good thing even to be in a cab for 30 minutes, especially if you're a bit claustrophobic, and we have had that situation. But we're doing our best to upgrade those elevators and continue to improve on their reliability. Generator replacements, self-explanatory. Same thing with window replacements. Item number 9, remodel renovations. This is something we added a few years ago. This is pretty much the
Screen went down.
This is pretty much the catch-all for screensaver. This is pretty much the catch-all for all the new one-time projects that come up. So, in that category, you will find things like remodeling the, I'll give you some examples. Remodeling the juvenile intake office area. I'm actually drawing a blank on what that one particular one was about. There was a deputy, I'm mixing my years up, that's why I'm drawing a blank on it. But if you look at, for example, the first item, this is under the capital improvement plan detail sheets that are also in your packet there. The MEO freezer, for example, well, you know, the with the bodies over at the medical examiner's office, those freezers are in need of replacement, so we're replacing one in 18 and one in 19, and then we won't have to do it again for another 15 or 20 years. So again, one-time unique projects that come up periodically, catch-all is this particular line item. You'll see information technology remodeling. What they're trying to do there is upgrade their office environment to make it more inviting, to attract the sort of quality employees that they need. IT, perhaps more than most departments, have had a hard time attracting talent lately, as the economy's getting better. And so, maybe it's not appropriate for me to use the Google analogy, but that's kind of what they're doing. They're kind of Googling their office environment over there. And I believe it's working pretty well. Other examples would be the jail booking office for the women's wing of the jail. So right now there's a central booking and intake area over at the jail for both males and females, which they make work, but of course you don't want to mix up those inmates if you can avoid it. And it just so happens that the pods for the women inmates are all at the south end of the jail. So the thought is okay, let's build a separate intake and booking area for just the female inmates at the south end of the jail, whereas the male one is on the northeast side of the jail right now. So that's, again, another one-time project that we're going to try and deal with. And three, there are no problems with my computer here. All right. Building automation system, that is for replacement of a system that started to be built, constructed back in the 80s. Much of the technology is very old now, hardware and software. So we're replacing it gradually, building by building, with a state-of-the-art system. We have a consultant that's been helping us do that, and a firm that was selected to actually replace the hardware and software. The pilot project, which was approved by you about a year ago, is coming to an end. We're going to be bringing an MR here shortly to you for the next phase. And that's going to allow us to, what the system allows us to do now, and this one will be the same plus more, like handheld controls, for example. Being able to control the systems from handhelds is all the environmental systems in the building are controlled through this computer system. So we have some building supervisors over in our public works building, way on the other side of campus, that can get online right now and adjust the temperatures and the air handlers and so on for every zone in this building, for example. But some of the components are old and not always reliable, and sometimes the dampers don't open when they're supposed to, when we tell the computer to do that. Plus, right now, the software came from a company that is local, and in the 80s, that was your only option. But there's only 2 guys left that know how to support the software. So we're hanging on by a string. If those guys retire, we're in bad shape. So we're going through this multi-year process of replacing that system in all of our buildings. Dropping down to civil projects, the parking lot paving program is self-explanatory. Utility upgrades, those are things like gas lines, the water mains, things like, water mains is a separate line item. The steam tunnel repairs is broken out separately from the utility lines because these are the actual physical tunnels, not the steam lines themselves. We have hundreds and hundreds of feet of steam tunnels that are big enough for people to walk through all over campus. They have been decaying because of salt seeping down from up above, especially if those steam tunnels are under parking lots or roadways. And they've been decaying the cement and the rebar that's in the structural component of the tunnels. So we're in the process of estimating what the cost is to replace various sections over time, prioritizing which sections need to come first, second, and so on. The service center road improvements, again, pretty self-explanatory. We periodically repave sections of our roadways on campus here. The road commission actually manages those projects. They contract for it, oversee the work that's being done by the contractors, but we pay for it. So it's a partnership, if you will, with the road commission. And lastly, the water main replacements, which are there. So we've had, in recent years, we've had numerous water main breaks. So what we're trying to do is catch up, be proactive and say, okay, let's replace the oldest sections so we don't have a breakdown. There's also an MR that's going to be coming through to you shortly for testing equipment, where we're able to test the water main valves and find out which ones need to be replaced sooner rather than later, so that when a water main break does happen, we'll make sure that we'll know that all the valves work, so that we can control and limit the impact of the water main shutdown on various buildings. So for example, over the Children's Village, if we had a water main breakdown and none of the valves work, we'd probably end up having to shut down the water to all the buildings without wanting to, but because we had to find one water main valve way back in the system that happens to shut the water down for several of those buildings, and as opposed to limiting limiting the shutdown to just one or two buildings. So that's probably way more detailed than you wanted to hear today, but I wanted to kind of give you an overview of where we are with that, with all the various line items. One last thing I wanted to point out, if you look at the carry forward available balance at the very bottom there in bold, you'll see that in 2020, the balance goes down to just under $500,000, which is pretty meager for a capital improvement budget. This is the sort of thing we have to play with every year. Back when we were in the middle of the recession, this was a real challenge. I mean, you may several of you that have been on the committee for a long time will recall that we were down to less than $1 million a year in many cases in terms of the number of projects that we were doing. So here, I mean, now you'll see that we're 15 million, 7 million, 5 million a year. So we've increased the number of capital improvement plans, exponentially just in the last 2 or 3 years compared to where we were in the recession. So that's a good thing. It means we're getting a lot more done. We're improving the campus. The downside is it's straining the workload of my department, and we're depending a lot on contractors, as we always do, to get work done. But at the same time, the construction market is booming right now, and so the costs are going up faster than the rate of inflation for these construction projects, and so we're constantly chasing the cost of the market, and we're always lagging behind it, which means, okay, we think this is going to cost this much next year, and then next year comes along and we're 50,000 or 100,000 short because the costs in the construction business have gone up so much. Plus, you get fewer bidders on projects when the market's booming, because they've got plenty of work. They don't want to deal with a little project that a government agency has. They want to go for the big projects and the big dollars. So it's a double-edged sword. We'd much rather have a booming economy, of course, and deal with these problems than what it was like during the recession. But it's a double-edged sword. So I'll open it up to any questions that you might have at this point.
Anybody have any questions? Commissioner McGilvery.
Art, can you give me a comparison? Let's go back to 2013, and you presented this same item. What would the amount be then? Any idea, just for a 5-year plan?
Let's take a look. I know that by around 2010, it was really low.
If you can't get it right now, Art, that's fine, I just,
No, it's in here, just like I said, it takes a while sometimes to, pull it up.
it just seems like in years past, you know, we're close to $60 million for a 5-year CIP plan here. And in years past, it was never that high. Now, I understand that you do it because the money's available and so on and so forth. But my biggest concern is need. I mean, just because the taxpayers have paid that money doesn't mean we should go out and spend it. And if we're just coming up with projects just to come up with them, I guess I'm a little concerned. And when I see a big jump difference from year over year, that's something that we need to look at.
So here's 2013. The overall total for the 5 years, well, excuse me. If you look at, so these are 10-year plans, right? So if you look at the grand total for the 10 years, this was 30 million. And look at the current one, it's 56 million for the 10 years. All right. So that's a little over 5 million a year here, whereas here is a little over 3 million a year. Okay. So that's the sort of increase. And again, even this 2013 was a fair amount above where we were in 2009, 2010 during the recession. But I would argue that we're not just finding projects to do. If you look at the renovation remodeling line item, those, and not always, but to a large degree, those would be the more discretionary projects. So we didn't, in 2013, we didn't even have a renovation remodeling line item because, like I said, it was added more recently. But if you look at that line item here, remodeling renovations, whoops. Yeah. It's, let's look at all 4 years together, about $2.2, $2.3 million of what one could really argue are discretionary projects. Things like roof replacements, elevator maintenance, and so on, really are projects that need to be done. Building security, which is 10 million of that total, is, and if you look at all the phases, it was 15 million altogether. If you look at the last year's plan, you'll see the 15 million over 3 years. We're down to 2 years now. So that's a big chunk of that increase from the 30 million 4 years ago where we are.
As far as procedure, we adopt the capital improvement plan, but when that project comes about, you're gonna be back before this board with what process? First bidding, I understand, but.
Right, so according to P&B rules of the board, capital improvement projects, every single one that's in these detail sheets, we have to come back to you first with a request to bid. And we present what it is we want to do and a cost estimate, and you tell us yes or no, or make these changes. Then we go out and we design it, and we bid it, and then we come back with a resolution that details all the reasons for it, details all the costs, who the contractor is, and requests approval to create the project work order. And again, you can say yes or no, or go back to the drawing board. So you get 2 chances to approve every single one of these. I have no, I didn't bring it with me, but I believe there was something like 200 different projects that are in this plan over just the next 5 years. So that's a lot of resolutions and a lot of requests to bid that are gonna be coming to you, so you have a lot of control over what gets done.
And I knew that, but I just wanted to make sure that we were in that situation. I guess my only comment would be, you know, I appreciate all the work you folks do, and you stay pretty busy. But I just have a concern with the large increase, year over year. And I really need to see when you bring it back to go out for bids or whatever it might be, the need, more than anything else. I wanna make sure that we're just not spending money just because it's in a rotation, for example, a roof replacement. I mean, some roofs hold up better than others, and because we're at a 10-year point and we need to replace a roof, if the roof that's on there is fine, then why can't we stretch that out a little bit more? That's my point. And so you're gonna need to show me that there's a real need to do these projects.
Absolutely.
Because I've seen a few projects around here that I still can't figure out the need, but yet we approved them, so. That's all.
I agree 100%. I mean, that is exactly what the committee's purview is and responsibility is, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
Commissioner Teets and then Commissioner Jackson.
So I echo everything that Commissioner McGilvery said. And, yeah, we do get 2 bites of apple, but I've been on enough committees where the response next time when you come for bid will be, well, it's in the plan, right? And I've had that argument given to me many times, and so, you know, I think this is an important discussion to have. And to what degree, other than the remodel renovations, are these truly deferred maintenance or maintenance issues that need to be done? Does that make sense? I guess, obviously, the renovations and then the security enhancements are additional improvements, one would say, to the rest are truly maintenance items that these are outstanding.
Yes, I'm just taking another quick.
Yeah, I understand.
Here. But, like the building automation system project, which is $3.5 million, it's a lot of money. Has it broken down yet? No, it hasn't broken down, but, you know, we're on 30-year-old technology, and we're down to 2 people at the software company to support it, so we have to also be proactive and say, okay, you know, 5 years from now, are we gonna be in a world of hurt because we didn't start 5 years before to deal with this problem that we saw coming?
And I guess where my head's at, where my concern is, you know, there's been a lot of items coming through and $100 grand here, $200 grand here, items, and that's great, and things cost money, and they have to be repaired and have to be fixed. But I think I'm gonna say for myself, at least, I'm gonna start asking a lot more questions, because I'm just concerned that, like, Commissioner from Madison Heights said, you know, it's taxpayers' dollars, and I'm concerned that, hey, are we really taking a second glance? And I know you're doing what you can, but, you know, elected by those taxpayers, I'm concerned that, are we making sure that every dollar is being spent well? So, all that said, I'll support this plan, but I'm starting to have some heartache with some of these things going, is this essential? Was this truly the best way to spend the dollar, you know, taken from someone in taxes? So, thank you for your work. It's not a critique of the work or the plan, but it's a growing concern I see as we spend more money, because at one point or another, there will be a downturn, and then we won't have money, and then we'll say, gosh, if only we would've, right? And so those are concerns I have, so, thank you.
I think very valid, and what I've been trying to do is make sure that the departments that are involved or affected by these projects are also represented at these meetings, since they're the ones that, you know, live and breathe these things more so than facilities. in many cases. And, couple other points is during the recession, we did have to defer a lot of things like roof maintenance and parking lots and so on, because we just literally didn't have the money. All the contributions from the general fund to fund the capital improvement plan were shut down for several years. So the last few years, we have been playing catch up to some degree. And I think if you were to walk around and look at the parking lots to all of our buildings, you might say we're not getting to them fast enough even. But that brings me to my last point, is going around and looking at the parking lots as an example. So let's say Kathy and I are sitting at this table and we're saying that something needs to be done up at Children's Village J building. Well, there's nothing that says you can't literally go up there with the two of us and take a look at it and walk around and you decide for yourself whether it's needed or not. And that's also within the purview of the P&B, is to go out and visit the buildings and the grounds and the roadways and so on. And I'd be happy to help facilitate that at any point in time. So.
Well, it sounds like a great afternoon.
Commissioner Jackson, what's next?
Counting potholes or something for an hour or two.
Thank you. That was actually going to be my comment. The fact that as members of this committee, that we have the opportunity to go on facility tours and get to see some of these things firsthand. I've been to some where the need was greater than others, but definitely there was a need there. I can say the lab tour, the lab looked very pristine, but then you have to keep a lab clean versus going into the area where we hold the forfeited items prior to the auctions, how they share that space with a refrigerator, big refrigerator there, and a mailing operation there, where it really looked, materials management really looked like it was in need of some type of renovation. So I can.
Yeah, it's an old warehouse, you're right. I mean, it looks like an old warehouse.
Right, but for some of the things that it was used for, that is just so much, you'd be surprised that a county with a reputation like this would have a building that in use like that for some of the things that we're doing there. So just to say, we do get an opportunity to see some of these things. It's just that when you see them in report form versus maybe when we take our tours, there's some space in between. So we get reports, we give reports, you help us, or you prepare a report for us after our inspections. Maybe it might be useful for us and our public to know that we are going out and determining maybe what is crucial, what is maybe most impactful to do at a certain time in relationship to this report. We get that report, but there's really nothing that kind of like prioritizes or shows the link between what we visually see and this report here. So I know there's detail, so maybe in the detail it could say inspected by this commissioner on this date, because I know that's what we do as part of this committee.
And good?
Yeah, I'm good.
And just don't ever lose sight that the capital improvement project is not a budgetary commitment. It's just a planning
Right.
document, a list of priorities, and Commissioner T's point, no obligations incurred against and no payments made from any appropriation account unless there's sufficient unencumbered assets or balance in the appropriation sufficient funds are available to meet the obligation. So everything has to come through, that's our board rules, through the committee and the board.
And to Commissioner Jackson's comments.
Because we've talked about kind of discontinuing those tours at some point. Some people say that it's a waste of time, but then when we gather a discussion like this, it's evident that it's not.
Well, a suggestion, kind of a hybrid approach is, since we have to come back with the request to bid, or come to you with a request to bid before we come back with the resolution, and there's generally going to be at least a couple of months between those two things happening, is that when a requested bid comes through and you look at it and say, well, that's a lot of money, or I don't really understand. I mean, you're telling me you need it for this reason, but I'm not convinced yet. You have that 2-month window now to say, okay, Art and Kathy, I wanna actually go see the operation before you bring a resolution back. So it's sort of like, we're giving you notice with the request to bid that this particular project you saw last year in the capital improvement plan is coming up now. And before the resolution comes through, before we actually get the bids back or whatever, you know, you ought to feel free to go out and actually see what's going on and say, okay, now I understand why you wanna do it. Or say, you know, you're full of it, I'm going back to the committee and telling everybody that this seems like a boondoggle. So, you know, you should feel free to make those requests of us, and we'd be happy to make those arrangements. To make the visits to the buildings.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call the roll.
Crawford.
Yes.
McGilvray.
Yes.
Berman.
Yes.
Teets.
Yes.
Quarles.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Whiteford.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Need a motion that we got communication, need a motion to receive and file. Moved by Commissioner Jackson, supported by Commissioner McGilvray, all in favor? Oh, discussion on that?
Yes, boy, it was on the building, authorities
Minutes.
minutes. And it's more for clarification than anything else. On the animal shelter, it says that this is the project that they're continuing. I thought we just, in the last couple of years, agreed to build a new animal shelter. So I guess my question is this the beginning of the new animal shelter, or is this?
Maybe Art, can you,
So,
status, and we have a tour, I think, next week.
So 2 years ago, we bonded, maybe a year and a half ago, we bonded for a new animal shelter. The original one is up on Brown Road and it's in pretty sad shape. So in the past 2 years, we've been building this animal shelter up here by the Sheriff's Admin Building. It is going to be completed by early September. The moving from the old shelter to the new will take place during September, and the doors will be open in October. So, and it's a completely different universe from the old animal shelter. So when you see the new building, I think you'll be impressed. Go look at the old one first, and then go look at the new one, and you'll see how entirely different this new one's gonna be.
No, I've gone to the old several times. Actually, every time I went out there, and I'm certainly not going on this tour, I end up coming home with a puppy, so. So I end up adopting it, so I'm not going to.
It's gonna be a tour, before our next board meeting, I believe. Is it,
I'm not going.
you can be part of that, Art?
I believe so, yes.
It's scheduled for, about 2 hours before our next board meeting.
No, you know, I come home with 2 puppies
No, there
every
won't-
time.
there won't be
Cocker
animals.
spaniels out there.
Yeah.
Oh, no animals, just looking at the facility?
Facility.
Okay, maybe I can make it through this time.
Yeah. Any more discussion on communications?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more discussion on communications? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed. Any other business? Seeing no other business, we will be adjourned.